Hi there. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can set up both Ubuntu 26.04 desktop and server versions on a Raspberry Pi. I'll be starting off by covering the setup of Ubuntu Desktop, followed by Ubuntu Server. If you just want to see the setup for Ubuntu Server and not Desktop, there's a timestamp in the description, or you can use the chapters in the video player to skip to it. Now, let's get started with Ubuntu Desktop. To begin with, I'll go over what you'll need. First, the Raspberry Pi Imager tool installed on a PC or a Mac. It's available for Windows, Mac and Linux. I'll leave a link in the description for it. The version I use for this video is 2.0.10. A Pi 4 or 5, a Pi 500 or 400, or a CM4 or CM5 with 4GB of RAM minimum. The Pi 500 Plus is also supported, but that uses an SSD instead of a microSD card. I would recommend more memory, as Ubuntu usually recommends 6GB for 26.04 desktop. For storage, you'll need a Class 10 or UHS 1 microSD card with roughly 32GB of storage. The minimum amount is 16GB, but I wouldn't go lower than 32GB. Personally, I would start at 64GB as the minimum. The cards I usually use are SanDisk Extreme or Extreme Pro, but other vendors will also work well. A microSD card reader, a full HD or higher resolution monitor, an HDMI to micro HDMI cable, an Ethernet cable if you don't plan on using Wi-Fi, a keyboard and mouse, wired, wireless and Bluetooth are all supported, a power adapter for your Pi, and finally a case to put the Pi in, along with a cooler if required. Okay, with the system requirements taken care of, let's crack on. So I've already installed the Pi Imager tool and I've got it open here. I've also inserted my microSD card into my machine. Now I'm running it on a Mac, but this tool is exactly the same on both Windows and Linux as well. So the first thing I want to do is select the Raspberry Pi that I want to use. In this case I'm going to be using Raspberry Pi 4. I'll click next. What I want to do then is scroll down and I want other general purpose OS. Select Ubuntu, and then I want Ubuntu Desktop 26.04. Select that, click next. Then I want to select my SD card reader, which in this case is this one here. One last thing, any data that's on this SD card will be erased, so just make sure that it's empty, or anything that you've got on there has been backed up. And there'll be no customization to do because that's actually done when you actually start Ubuntu up for the first time. So I'll just select write. Before you click I understand, erase and write, just double check that to make sure it is actually the SD card reader that you're using. I'll click that. I'll enter my password. This is the password I'm using for my Mac to log into. Now if this is the first time you've ran this, it'll take a while because it'll have to download the image first, and then once it's downloaded it'll say writing and you just wait for that to finish. I'll speed this part up. And that's now finished, so I'll just click on finish. Now depending upon the app settings, I think by default it actually ejects the SD card from the operating system, so you should be able to just pull that out of your SD card reader. So I'm now just going to install that into the Raspberry Pi, and then let's boot it up and see what we get. And we're now at the Ubuntu Desktop setup screen. So I'm just going to select English. So select a keyboard, skip the Wi-Fi because I'm on a wide Ethernet. That's optional. Again, optional, I'll skip that. And just set a time zone. I'll just skip that for now. It'll ask you this again, I don't know why it does it. Okay, choose our theme, so I'll just go with dark mode. And I'll just click finish. And that's it, that's Ubuntu Desktop ready to go. Got our file manager. There's not really much in the way of differences between this and the version that you install on, say, a traditional desktop PC. There is a bit more tuning done with it to make it work on lower amounts of memory and slower CPUs, but other than that, there's no real differences that I think you'll notice. And that's all you need to do to get the desktop version of Ubuntu 26.04 installed on a Raspberry Pi. Now, let's move on to Ubuntu 26.04 Server. The requirements for it are different from the desktop version, and there's more customization to do, along with a workaround that's needed for the networking side of things to work. I'll quickly go over the system requirements for 26.04 Server. First, you'll need the Pi Imager tool installed. It's available for Windows, Mac and Linux. There is a download link for it in the description. In terms of supported Pis, these are a Pi 5 or Compute Module 5. The Pi 500 and 500 Plus are also supported. a Pi 4 or Compute Module 4. The Pi 400 is also supported as well, and a Pi 3B, 3B Plus or CM3 are also supported. All of them require a minimum of 1 GB of RAM. Lastly, a Pi 02W. Although this model doesn't have 1 GB of RAM, it's only got 512 meg. Ubuntu do support it, but I personally would not recommend using it. The reason is that a fresh install of Ubuntu 26.04 Server uses roughly around 345 meg of RAM, so there isn't much left to work with. For storage, a Class 10 or UHS-1 microSD card with 32 GB of storage. The minimum is 4 GB, but I wouldn't go lower than 32 GB. You likely would also struggle to find cards that are lower than 16 GB these days. Even 32 ones are starting to be difficult to get hold of. The cards I usually use are SanDisk Extreme or Extreme Pro, but other vendors will also work as well. Next, a power adapter for your Pi, a microSD card reader, and finally a case to house it in with a cooler, but that's optional. And that's all you need to run it headless. If you want to, you can attach a keyboard and monitor if you want access to the command line console. Okay, let's move on to getting this thing set up. I've already got the Pi Imager tool installed and opened up, as you can see here. Now before you get started, just click on App Options, where it says Eject Media when finished. Just turn that off. There's a reason for that, we'll get to that later. Click on Save. Now before we go any further, I just want to make you aware that your SD card will be erased during this process and Ubuntu will be put on there. So if you've got any data on there, you need to get it off before you go any further. What I'm going to do now is select my Raspberry Pi. For me it'll be a Pi 4. I'll scroll down to Other General Purpose OS. I'll click that and then I'll click Ubuntu, and then I want Ubuntu Server 26.04. I'll select the SD card reader here, and now I can do the customization. This is one of the things that you don't do on Ubuntu Desktop, so I'll just give it a host name of Pi 4-server, select my locale. You can also skip this customization if you don't want it. Now it'll ask you for a username and password. I've done this before, so it's just using the previous credentials that I've cached. Now if you did skip the customization, then it does create a default user account called Ubuntu with a password of Ubuntu. Both are lowercase, so just be aware of that. Click Next, then it'll ask you for any Wi-Fi credentials if you want to use it. Again, I've put them in previously so they've been cached. Then it'll ask you if you want to enable SSH, in this case yes I do, and then you can use either password authentication or public key authentication, that's up to you. For this video I'm just going to go with password authentication. That's all done. We'll click right, double check that this is the right SD card reader that you want to use, and again your data on that card will be erased, so anything that you want to keep on it, you need to get it off before you click on I understand. With that said, I'll click on I understand, erase and write. Ask me for my max password. Now it might take a moment to download the actual image if this is the first time you've run it. After that it'll go straight to writing. I'll fast forward past this part. Now that that's been written and verified, I'll just click on finish. Now, if you put the card into the Pi and boot it up, it will look like it worked fine, which for the most part is true, but there is an issue at the moment. That issue is that during the first boot, for some reason, it doesn't bring the systemd network D service back up after applying the netplan config. This means that you cannot SSH to the Pi or even get a ping response from it. I did some troubleshooting and there wasn't anything obvious as to why that is. The netplan config was okay, and I could see that it had been applied in the etc netplan config file that Ubuntu creates from the custom config that is part of the build. This could be specific to the Pi 4, but I don't have a Pi 5 to test with, so it might work fine on that model. To resolve it, there are 3 fixes that I found for this. You only need to apply one of them, and it would require a monitor and keyboard as you'll need access to the console. The first fix was to simply restart the systemd-network D service by running sudo systemctl restart systemd-network D. The second option was to reapply the netplan config by running sudo netplan apply. And the last option was simply to reboot the Pi. In each case, the network will come back up and any future reboots will not have the problem. It only occurs on the first boot after a fresh image has been applied. If you want to avoid having to attach a keyboard and monitor and have it do one of the fixes automatically, do the following. Before you eject the microSD card, open up a text editor such as VS Code. Open up the microSD card in Finder, Windows Explorer or your file manager on Linux. drag and drop the user-data file into VS Code. Under the Run CMD section, add a new line after the command or commands that are already in there, followed by 2 spaces, a dash, another space, and then a set of angle brackets. It may automatically format this for you. Go into the angle brackets, add a space, and then type one of the following 3 options. Which one you choose is up to you. systemctl, space, restart, space, systemd network D, and then a space, netplan, apply, and then a space, reboot, and then a space. Personally, I opted for the netplan apply option. Save the file, close it, and then close out VS Code. Any commands that are under the Run CMD section will only run on the first boot. They will not run again. Now you can eject the microSD card and install it into your Pi. It should work as expected. So I've just installed the microSD card into the Pi, and now I'm just going to turn it on. Whilst that's booting, I'm just going to run a ping test against it to know when it comes back up. With this being the first boot, it might take a while. Okay, that seems to be responding alright, so I'll just stop that, clear the screen, and now I'll SSH over to it, accept that, enter password, and that's all you need to do to get Ubuntu 26.04 server running on a Raspberry Pi. With that done, that concludes this video. If you got value from this, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell to know when I release another video. If you'd like to see some more Raspberry Pi and Pico tutorials like this, I have a playlist with more here on the left, and on the right, here's the video that YouTube thinks you might like. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.